Here we go. I love bringing on guests that are double dippers or triple dippers into my podcast series. And this week, we're focusing on you if you want to create strategic plans to achieve exponential growth or are looking for clarity implementing, evaluating, and revising those plans among many other areas. Welcome back to That Entrepreneur Show, and now a top 1.5% global podcast. Thank you all for tuning in, and a big thank you to all my guests who have also joined the show. And today we are bringing back James Richardson. James, it is great to see you since our recording on Writing with Authors.
Thanks for having me again so quickly, Vince. I'm happy to be here.
Of course, you added a lot of value during your first run, and this one will be no different, as today's guest works with entrepreneurs in the consumer packaged goods industry. I learned he never works with investors or investment firms, nor does he accept their direct referrals. He is a pure play founder, ally, and some of his past clients, Dr. Squatch Soap Company, Once Upon a Farm, Rebel Creamery, and so much more. He really focuses on big-sized startups where he'll get you thinking big if you're not just there yet. He generally does not work with startups selling less than 2 to 3 million in annual trailing revenue, with the exception of founders who are members of historically underrepresented groups in industry. He also has another great podcast, another top podcast in the world, Startup Confidential, for hard-hitting commentary on growing an early-stage consumer brand. And of course, we spoke about this before the show as he was on Writing with Authors, award-winning book, 10,000 plus copies sold. Be sure to check out his Writing with Authors interview in the show description. And today's show, it is brought to you by speaker coach Cesar Cervantes. He'll help you get on that TEDx stage. He specializes in helping you sound out your speaking message. Be sure to scroll down in the episode description to learn more about that from Cesar. But before we get going, I would also like to share that this week's Spotlight story is going to be a great one towards the end of the show. Today's guest is an expert in early stage businesses, and we're going to get into a write-up from Business Professor online that just clarifies a lot about early stage businesses to help you, the listeners. But I'm ready to kick this one off. James, let's go back in time. Why did you become an entrepreneur at first? What led you to start this journey?
Well, I was bored at my old job. And it was only going to get worse. I don't think I fit in anymore because the direction of the company had shifted. And so I had to make a decision whether I wanted to go find another desk job in a W-2 or just take some of the things I've learned and produce content and try to go be a consultant on my own. And so I picked the latter path, but I had spent so years getting ready to do that, sort of skill-wise, emotionally, financially. And then once a few things were aligned, I bit the bullet and did it.
I love what you said. They're taking the skills from your old job and transforming that into your own company, your own profession. Everyone out there, there's always lessons learned in our experiences, our journeys. And he's a great example there of taking what he knows, he's already an expert at, now making it in his own. He's been at this for quite a bit now, James. Let's talk about your current business a little more. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the podcast, the books, everything that meshes together.
Sure. Yeah. I'm a management consultant for early stage consumer brands. And there really aren't there's a few people who do what I do, but they're actually usually investors, like angel investors on boards. So, they may have run a business before and then they get on a board, put in a little seed money into the kitty. And, so there's people like that, but there's very few people like me who just function like a roving BCG consultant for early stage brand, because that kind of talent can make a lot more money working at a management consulting. so I found this void of disciplined analytical thinking based on actual data patterns in the marketplace, which I knew about because we had done some work at my prior company. And when I left the company, I got them to agree to let me use that IP, and that's the seed of the book behind me, with some very unique research that had never been done before. And it was only relevant to early stage consumer brands and anyone else trying to invest in that.
Right. I remember you saying that on your Writing with Authors interview, how you were able to bring that with you to your new endeavors and get it right into the book, which left you not as much work, still plenty of work to do in the book, but it saved you a little bit of time. While we're talking about that, bring that up. It's right behind you here. Yeah.
Oh, this thing is hardcover edition. So, I was lucky to get a cover blurb from John Forker, who ran Annie's Mac and Cheese and Once Upon a Farm, Baby Food with Jen Garner. That he's probably better known for that now. So, and he was an early reader of an early draft. So, in terms of my business, I sit in an air-conditioned shed in the desert in Arizona, and I work with very select folks every year, probably 6 to 8, and I charge obscene fees. From the perspective of my audience, probably listening to this, mainly because, and I assume we're here to talk about business details, it's almost impossible to make money as a solopreneur and actually not kill yourself if you're doing everything yourself, and do a volume-based business. It just doesn't work. So I've watched this so many. I watched friends quit their job and fail trying to do this. It's one of the ocean of people who do like digital marketing freelance. This is the trap they set for themselves. They would need 1,000 clients a year to recoup their corporate income. So thank God I'd been kind of gutting my MBA on the side. I worked with them. I hired MBAs. So I realized that I actually had to have a revenue model first that made sense. And that revenue model was very large 5-figure fees. And creating an aura of expertise in which you spend years wondering whether you'll qualify to work for me. I know that sounds arrogant, but the reality is that filtering effect brings me highly deferential clients who just want to work. They want to go. They actually would pay 3 times as much, I'm pretty sure. I've just never asked. So, because when you look at the P&L of a $30 million company, my fee just disappears.
Right.
It's the same as their electric bill. So, I mean, it becomes an insurance policy, and that's what I sell. I sell insurance.
And you bring your expertise to the table.
And this is why you should believe in the insurance.
I mean, you've got 11,000 people believing in the insurance without your coaching.
Yeah. Now, I give advice, and that's an easy thing to make fun of, I think, in a white collar world, right? I mean, we all made fun of consultants before. Me a little less so because I've always been one. So I'm a former academic, so I privilege the concept of concepts. And I was unfortunately good in school, so I'm like the wrong person to tell consultant jokes to. But anyways, the idea is that I sell advice, but I also help clients figure out the prioritization of the questions they need to ask, the decisions they need to make. That is very hard to do when you are stressed out and overwhelmed by your own business, and you've never done this before or anything like it. So I work with amateurs who are new to the industry with strong products, rapidly growing businesses. There's something in the market happening. So my job comes in, make sure they understand what the hell that is. Do you really understand what's going on? And I use behavioral science to figure that out. So, and then I work with them again to focus their planning and their growth strategy based on what the market's actually really telling us about their widget. So, I have a lot of qualifications. It's very hard to qualify to work with me. I don't even take phone calls. So the only phone calls I take are, how can we work together? And those are 15 minutes long. I learned, your listeners will like this. If you even offer a 30-minute free chat, you might as well just throw your calendar to Satan because he's got total control. There are a lot of people out there who would love to just have someone listen to them. I'm not judging that motive, but I'm not here to do it for free. So they should find other people to do it. I would argue they should find professionals in most cases. And you have no idea the kind of calls I used to get when I had my telephone number in the footer of my webpage. So, About 80% of them were investors trying to steal ideas from me and make use of my intellect and 20 years of experience so they could go make millions.
I think that's a lot of sound advice right
So,
there.
so now I'm in a special place because there was so much energy in this sector, and most of the investors have no fucking idea what they're doing. Absolutely none whatsoever. There's a tiny group that do. I would get the calls from people who don't know what they're doing. Anyways, I learned that if you don't allow yourself to be accessed much, you become seen as a privileged expert. This is social science, right? And I had to actually rediscover these laws of behavior because it's really tempting when you're starting any professional services business to just get some goddamn revenue through the door. Anything. And that's when you go down the slope to hell, because then you don't care about the fee. Then you'll take any fee they give you. Then you'll take any scope they want. And now basically you're essentially a short order shit cafe cook at a truck stop. And you won't last. Moreover, you will hate your life because nobody wants to show up. No one wants to quit their job and go solo and be just as used and abused as they were in a bureaucratic office. And that's what's going to happen if you don't set up the revenue model and the qualifications and work on the content to set you up. So part of the problem is what I've noticed, a lot of people are really experts who are quitting their job to become an expert. Like they've got no material to write. They're going to have a really hard time convincing anybody out of 10,000 equivalent people that they should be the one. They're going to be limited to their actual social network, their face-to-face network. That will last about 2 years.
Yep, I agree.
And then they'll be back at a desk. I have seen this so many times on LinkedIn. 5 years I'm in my 6th. 5 years is about the cutoff. That's what about 98% of people who went solo are back at the desk.
I think even less than that, maybe 2 years.
Oh yeah, working for the man again.
It's truth.
While I have people's attention, don't do this unless you have something that someone else thinks is rather extraordinary. It only needs to be 1 or 2 other people and not your parents. So you need to know the space you're in and say, you know what, I have a case study. I had a couple clients where because that's where this book came from. This book came from one client project. And I had the recognition, holy shit, this is valuable. You do need that. I would say make sure you have something like that before you jump. Because you don't want to be doing a volume-based business on your own, because you will not make money. And you will be working you'll be working 80 hours a week and you'll be miserable. So the challenge with this whole thing, Vincent, is that you have to actually be disciplined to the notion of becoming an expert. And that discipline involves a really terrifying behavior, which is turning away people who are literally have their open checkbook. They're on the web with their open checkbook ready to give you $10,000, but your fee minimum is 20. And they're not qualified. And you have to have the kahunas to say, no, we're not a good fit. And then you go have a drink.
I think that's incredible.
I do this every month.
Being patient, being selective of who you're working with, and then not making yourself miserable. I think I can resonate with a lot of that, especially in the beginning. I don't want to miss out on any sales. I don't want to miss out on anything. I have a story that can relate to a lot of people one way or another. So I'm sitting out there taking this, and it doesn't really align with exactly I'm working with. Now, even as far as I've started coaching now over the last year, I had a book project come my way it was just very short, and they were trying to nickel and dime me because of the length of the book. And that's not, no, because that's more trouble than it's worth. We've all seen that happen. Then it's something else with it. The project turns into a bigger project for a fraction of the cost. Everyone out there, stay true to your gut. And this is something I needed to even hear today, just to re-solidify in your head that the value you have and the qualifications you set up, the perfect and ideal client for you. Thank you so much, James. But you do have a lot to offer in other areas of entrepreneurship because you have been on your journey, as you said, now 5+ years. There are a lot of challenging parts and there are a lot of great parts to entrepreneurship. I'd love to hear from you. You can either do challenging or some of your favorite parts. I know they can help out our audience in similar shoes.
Yeah, I think I'll start with the positive. I mean, I have Asperger's, so this is a bit of a specialized 2% of the population problem. I had no concept of how overjoyed I would be to have no colleagues. I sound really antisocial, and I am. But the point is, I was able to eliminate a specific stress that doesn't work with my brain. And man, did that change my mood, my marriage, my everything. And I think everyone can find there's something about the current work environment that's probably driving you batshit crazy and is one of the key contributors to you wanting to go off on your own. That's fine. Just make sure you have some expertise as well. But whatever that is you're leaving, when you don't experience it again, you're going to be, I think, in a much better baseline state to add a lot of value to your clients. So the other thing that's really been good for me is I think because of what I do, and because my sales machine is actually driven entirely by content marketing, I do not do sales call. I do not network for monies. Because of my neurology, I can't do that. That would actually go nowhere. So I spend most of my time writing, Vincent, which is my number one strength. And everyone has said that since the 6th grade. And it's only gotten, I mean, I know I sound arrogant, but it's only gotten better, right?
Right, of course.
So you have to build a business where the day-to-day is grounded in your number one stratospheric strength that nobody in your social network that you've ever met in your life has, right? That's so like the people you know, no one can write as well as I can. That's what I mean by a strength. That's what you need to stand on and build. Make sure your business daily activities are that. Because man, you will be jazzed when you show up to work every day. And if you aren't that jazzed, how are you going to show up for work? Because you work for yourself. When the alarm goes off and you go back to sleep, no one's sitting there playing mommy.
That's the truth.
So it's like, I mean, your wife, your partner's not going to do it. They didn't fall in love with you to nag your ass about your own work. Are you kidding me? No. So what I've seen with people is sometimes they find themselves in a revenue creation model where it's not even leveraging their strength. I see this a lot with marketing people who go out on their own. Well, what kind of marketing are you really actually amazingly good at? There's like 20 different tactical levers in marketing. Which one? So while I have people's attention, read a book by David Baker called The Business of Expertise. If you want to achieve what I've been able to achieve, and I don't make $1 million a year, but I make mid-6 figures, right? So if you want to achieve that, you have to be ruthless about defining your expertise, and don't be afraid if that expertise seems incredibly niche, because you're looking at Mr. Niche times niche times niche. I have about 50,000 startups at any one time because they constantly fail. At any one time, available to be my clients, and I work with 6 to 8 a year.
Yep. What was the name of that? What was the name of that book one more time? I'm going to put
The Business of Expertise. It has sold more copies than mine, quietly, or not so quietly, but he outlines how you can essentially create an expertise positioning that ties directly to your service offerings. And that's what everyone screws up in the first 10 years, Vincent, which is why they're back working for the man with their W-2 slip. They never figured it out. Well, they couldn't figure out how to charge enough.
All right. Well,
I think like what you're doing, like I could see you, my God, because the mental health topic has become so mainstream now in terms of people once we became more open about it in the last 10 years, suddenly now everyone wants to have speakers. But do you go to the schools that pay you nothing or next to nothing? Or do you go to for-profit recovery centers that are probably paid? Because they're multi-million-dollar operations.
I love it.
I mean, I hate to say it, but you got to follow where the budget is.
The author of that book you said was David Baker. Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
David Baker. Yeah. I think that's important advice for everyone listening on to hear, even myself, where so what if it's real niche, right? You're going to attract the people that you're supposed to be doing with. And that's something I'm trying to do more and more. I'm trying to align myself with things that just make sense, not just doing it to do it, which is something in the beginning of entrepreneurship. It was yes, 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 shall speak here. I'm speaking to groups of people that really, just not in line with me at all. Great advice there. But before we hop into the spotlight story now, some challenging parts of entrepreneurship, as there may be other people on this journey.
I think the most challenging part is that your revenue will be very sporadic when you start off working on your own, especially in professional services, because there's not going to be a huge audience that trusts you. You may have a target audience, but it's a really tiny group that actually knows you and trusts you enough to take the leap. So you have very spotty, dodgy, roller coastery month-to-month revenue. And that, when you spent your whole career on W-2 every 2 weeks, getting the same number, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number. Here's a story. My book came out, right? I spent 7 months cranking this thing out, working with professional, ex-Big Four editors, copywriters, all the professional talent you need to make a book that's indistinguishable from a trade book. And, it's out the door. I had a great launch week, got my 80 reviews, boom, boom, boom. And it started to build. The sales were doing fine on Amazon. So that whole thing was a success. And, 2 months later, and I'm sitting there with my wife going, where's the business? What the fuck happened? Holy shit. And she's like, James, calm down. They've got to read it. Then they have to think about it. And then they have to think about it some more. So it took another month, and then the leads started coming in. These are people now paying me 30, 40 grand. And 8 months before, they were paying me 4 grand.
So inspiring. It's so inspiring. Everyone out there, this is also talking to myself. You never know when your life is going to change if you keep plugging away, moving that needle. He went from 4K to 40K just by sticking to his mission, something that has not been easy for me. Obviously, someone who focuses on schools. We're in the middle of COVID, then the pandemic, then after the pandemic, then educators that are either short-staffed or don't care anymore. They're so now everyone out there, stay true to what you were doing. If you have not gotten the value that I had just yet, I think that you might have your podcast on mute. And now for today, we're going to dive into the spotlight story. We're going to talk about a few areas of this article and then bring back James on to share some of his experiences, some of his expertise with early stage businesses. And the article starts with defining it as such. It is a term used to categorize a startup business venture. It generally concerns the phase of startup development, generally preceding the rapid growth phase. The early stage is characterized by activities such as R&D, market research, and product development. This is considered by entrepreneurs, investors, and researchers to be the riskiest stage in the startup life cycle. The probability of success of venture depends heavily upon actions taken during this stage, where consumers or the customer market will be called to evaluate and compare price, quality, and feasibility of the business's value proposition. This may include comparing the product or service with existing offerings already in the market, which is known as a beta test, and the purpose is to reach a minimum valuable product or value offering to the market. There are company conditions during the early stage, and there are challenges for the early stage, including that the company is new and it does not have ample resources to cover its operational and other related activities. Because of the lack of credit history and and revenue, traditional means of borrowing is generally out the question. And for this reason, early stage ventures typically rely on investors to fund business growth, which may come at a very high cost. And the amount of investment and percentage of the business sold is based upon the company valuation. And the methods for valuing a company at this stage are very imprecise. There's a lot going on in the beginning, James. You've seemed to master the process, help others master it as well. Please give us some insight.
I think that your overview had a lot to do with finance. And I think that I don't, I'm not a financial strategist or advisor for my client base. But one of the things I've noticed in a lot of the amateur startups in my consumer industry is that they're not starting with enough seed capital, and they're not starting off having warmed up an angel network well in advance of later rounds that they're going to need to sort of stair-step the finances and funnel rapid growth. Now, to be honest, most people don't organically generate a lot of rapid growth. So
Mm.
the actual biggest problem with consumer startups, since they're very cash intensive, is that they're negative. Their EBITDA is so negative that they don't raise enough seed money to even last 12 months
Mhm.
or 18 months. So, the seed money requirements in my industry are pretty high. And I would, you need to have at least 2 years of your fixed operating costs and, conservative production revenue raised privately in advance. So you shouldn't really take the leap in my view. I mean, this is like $500,000 what we're talking
Right.
about in most cases. That's a lot of money.
Mhm.
And one reason I don't work with startups, Vincent, in my industry is that there's so many, I call them credit card founders. I have nothing disparaging to say about their ideas as a class of people, but
Mhm.
they are not wealthy enough to be doing this. But the system and the ecosystem goads everybody to start. It's
Mhm.
like there's all this celebration of starting. On LinkedIn, and I started, and there's all these starting posts, and I always cringe when I read those because I'm like, man, I was pissing my pants for the first 18 months of my business. I was not excited. I was terrified. I had a spreadsheet that was titled, "How do we not lose the house?" you know? So I wasn't in a celebratory mood because to me, success is something I was going to defer to the situation I'm in now, years
Mhm.
later.
Yep.
I had to figure out how to get there um, by any means necessary that was legal. So I think the challenge is that if you allow people to start businesses with credit cards and say $50,000 from Uncle John, which is not enough, by the way,
Mhm.
you can actually get started in some categories. Like some categories will do a co-man run of a snack bar for 10,000 bars. There's plants that will do that.
Mhm.
So the whole ecosystem actually sucks people in who probably aren't even ready, right? Because they haven't done the category research, don't understand the retail environment, don't understand go-to-market dynamics, um, haven't warmed up their angel network. And I'm not talking like Mark Cuban. That's not what I'm talking about. No, I'm talking about just ordinary high net worth individuals,
I love it. I
right?
think
And there are millions of them in America now.
mhm.
We're not a country lacking money.
That's for sure. I think it's just starts with doing your research, finding individuals to put in that circle. You don't need to be on Shark Tank like he's saying. And I know there are certain apps, I can't give you the names of them now, where there are individuals looking to invest in products and services out there. There are plenty of resources. It's been lights out, but before we let him go and find out the best place online to look for what he has to offer, which entrepreneur throughout history would you choose to sit down with, dead or alive?
Dan Lobetsky of Kind Bar, because I'd love him to endorse my second edition.
Well, where would you sit down? Where would you sit down if the meeting was?
Wherever the hell he wants. I wrote about him in my book, not because I'm an irrational fanboy, because he actually did something everyone thought was insane, and pulled it off. And he remained private.
I love it. Well,
And he took, and he didn't take a lot of outside money. So he's like my dream model for my own client base. Like, this is how you do this.
I love it. Well, James, thank you so much for taking the time to come back on the show. Everyone, again, be sure to scroll down for his episode on writing with authors, but where online is the best place to look for you?
Uh, you can go to LinkedIn, type in Dr. James Richardson. I should pop up.
And for the books, you have a book page as well.
Yeah, you can go to rampingyourbrand.com. I have a lovely little book page, which will give you an overview with all the endorsements, or go to Amazon and buy it.
I love it, everyone. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to ask James, excuse me, to send me the link to his books, everything, all that. That way I can copy and paste to give you the best value. He's a great guy to know. As he mentioned, he's very, very difficult to get a hold of, but he's got a lot of content out there. And if you are in that niche, someone that can find value from his services, be sure to reach out. Again, there is a 15-minute call, he says, but He has a very specific criteria not to waste his time or yours. I think that's a great example to set for your business. And I am at Vincent A. Lancey on all social media and YouTube. The show is at thatentreprenurshow.com. The show is at That Entrepreneur Show on all social networks. And with that, we are signing off. James, thank you again.
Thanks, Vincent. Great to be here.